Hello, this is Dr. Jackalyn Rainosek with the DTP-Leadership Group, and this is Hot Topic Bold Talk. I'm determined to provide podcasts because I think there's too many things going on, and so I'm working hard to do that. As many of you know, I've broken 6 ribs, and so I'm getting better. I'd like for you to know that. But of course, I'm still limited in what I can do. I want to talk to you tonight, though, about something that's been bothering me for a long time. And that is the lack of truth, the lack of leadership, and the way Trump runs this country. And it's almost like he's a photo op presidency. Anytime there's a photo op or he can create theater or drama, then he thinks that is what needs to be done. So I want to talk to you tonight about what I think is most important. What I see are the tremendous areas of weakness that he has and what he's doing. And I'm doing this because I think the American public is being sold a bill of goods, and we need to start looking at the reality of what is happening. And I think I was a history teacher for many, many years, and I taught world history, American history. I was always interested in the social sciences. And so what I know is that history to me is a way that we can see the world and then benefit from what happened in that history and then be able to move forward. And we're not moving forward. We're not moving anywhere that has sanity to it. And I think that's the stress level all of us feel, is that insanity that we experience with Trump every day. I think we're in a moment in American political life where we need to come to a place and we must step back, breathe as a public, and take in the truth with fresh eyes rather than through the haze of political noise which he creates. Today, as the world observes the turmoil that surrounds Donald Trump's second term, we are living one of those defining moments for us. It is precisely why Kamala Harris's book, 107 Days, or 107 Days, must be recommended, celebrated, and understood. In fact, reading should be required for anyone who wants to understand what has happened to our democracy, how campaigns function, and how a candidate grounded in democratic values navigates a system increasingly distorted by misinformation and extremism. I know critics have been harsh about her book, some dismissing it, I think, before they ever read it. But those criticisms are not grounded in reality. Harris has given us something far more valuable than a typical campaign memoir. She gives us a clear account of events, decisions made under pressure, internal disagreements, successes earned through discipline, and yes, mistakes she acknowledges without defensiveness. That honesty alone makes the book rare in the current political landmark, where so many public figures treat acknowledgement of error as weakness. Harris instead treats it as integrity. And I think that's all of what we all ought to be doing. Because integrity is based on honesty, and certainly Trump has no integrity. The book does not exist to flatter her image or secure her place in history. It exists to inform us. She shows us the daily grind behind a modern campaign, the kind of detail the public rarely sees and yet desperately needs to understand. Her transparency about donors, staff, Biden's role, on the ground operations, and the emotional strain of those days provides a window into the democratic process. At a time when we need to understand the reality of the acts of resistance that we see in Trump and so many others in the Congress. Anyone who cares about defeating Trump and about strengthening democracy should see Harris's book a strategic tool. She has done the work of telling the truth. The least we can do is read it. As important as 1,007 Days is, the conversation cannot end there with the book. The political world we inhabit today requires us to shift from Harris's account of a principled campaign to the disturbing reality of a president now shaping global affairs. Harris helps us understand the internal mechanisms of democracy. Trump forces us to confront the consequences of a president who is driven almost entirely by photo opportunities, ego-driven theatrics, and an alarming disregard for the complexities of international conflict. If Harris shows us what democratic leadership looks like behind the scenes, Trump shows us what happens when the leadership is replaced by spectacle. Trump has always sought admiration, but in his second term, the hunger for praise has transformed into a governing model. Every foreign engagement becomes an opportunity to stand before cameras, to announce sweeping victories that have not been earned, and to claim world-changing breakthroughs that evaporate the moment that the cameras are turned off. His speeches are filled with declarations about ending wars or fixing the world, but those statements are not anchored in a strategic plan, a diplomatic groundwork, or even a basic understanding of the forces driving each conflict. They are driven by image, by the need to appear strong, decisive, and globally influential. They're all about him, not about our country. The deeper tragedy of Trump's governing style is that it prioritizes imagery over impact. His governing style prioritizes imagery over impact. This is not accidental, it's intentional. Trump has always understood politics as performance, but performance can only substitute for policy for so long before the cracks show. When the cameras leave, the hard, unglamorous work of repairing broken alliances, rebuilding institutions, and managing global crises falls to others, not him. In Trump's world, that others category is vast. Diplomats, generals, intelligence professionals, humanitarian workers, and democratic partners around the globe who must scramble to stabilize situations shaken by his impulsive theatrics. Foreign policy requires planning, consistency, and knowledge. Trump replaces all these with charismatic slogans and moments of manufactured triumph. His supporters often mistake this for strength, but the world sees the truth. A president who doesn't understand the complexity of the global conflict is a president easily manipulated by those who do. And no adversary has mastered the manipulation better than Vladimir Putin. Ukraine is one of the clearest examples of how Trump's desire for dramatic optics has undermined American leadership. Instead of approaching the conflict as a strategic challenge requiring deep understanding of Russian motivations, European alliances, and Ukraine resilience, he framed it as an opportunity to showcase himself as the world's ultimate deal maker. He repeatedly claimed he would resolve the conflict very quickly, as if peace negotiations were negotiations for one of his real estate deals. This mindset exposed his profound misunderstanding of Putin's long-term objective. Putin is not playing for camera flashes or public applause. He is executing a decade-long plan to restore Russian dominance over former Soviet spheres of influence. Trump, however, mistook flattery for respect and photo opportunities for progress. The Alaskan meeting crystallized this misunderstanding of his and misjudgment. Trump arrived expecting a symbolic concession he could sell to the American public as a diplomatic milestone. Instead, Putin offered nothing. Trump left humiliated, unable to produce the image he desired, and unaware of the signals that Putin had sent to allies and adversaries alike that the United States under Trump could be pressured, toyed with, and manipulated. It is telling that the European leaders feel compelled to brief Trump after the meetings to explain what he missed prior to Alaska and in Alaska. These leaders, far more familiar with Putin's ambitions and Russia's historical strategies, understood that Trump's shadow reading of the conflict endangers not only the Ukraine, but the entire European security architecture. Meanwhile, the Ukraine actually had great success. The remarkable development of their drone program, the resilience of their people, and their ability to confront a much larger invading force has unfolded not because of Trump, but despite him. His wavering support created uncertainty in NATO and forced Ukraine into a constant state of diplomatic balancing, unsure when or how the United States might shift its position. In this way, Trump's photo op style of leadership becomes a strategic liability. Alliances cannot trust his commitments. Adversaries sense opportunity. And the cost of this instability grows with every decision made for the camera rather than about how to resolve the crisis. Few regions have been more damaged by speculative-driven foreign policy than the Middle East. Trump's approach follows a familiar pattern: a dramatic announcement, a moment of global attention, and the collapse of unrealized plans left to smolder once the spotlight moves on. His bombing of Iran, widely interpreted as an attempt to bolster the Israeli prime minister, was made without a comprehensive plan for what would follow. It was a photo op masqueraded as policy. Trump believed he had secured a historic peace agreement, but without implementation, cooperation, or governance structures, the so-called deal evaporated as soon as the cameras stopped rolling, and nowhere was this pattern more painfully evident than in Gaza. Olivia Troy's analysis reveals what insiders already knew. Trump's Gaza plan was never a plan. It was a PowerPoint presentation masquerading as diplomacy. Troy describes documents after document filled with vague arrows, empty flowcharts, and a question mark where actual strategy should have been. Where is the stabilization force? Well, it's fictional. It's fictional. The governance structure, non-existent, undefined. International partners, uncommitted, and not organized. So Troy, having lived through the disastrous post-war planning in Iraq, recognized the symbols immediately: overconfidence, lack of planning, resilience on private contractors, and the belief that optics can substitute for governance. The Gaza ceasefire was treated as a photo op, a headline, a clip for the news cycle. And once it was captured, Trump moved on, leaving behind unanswered questions, unstable conditions, and a region that cannot rebuild by press releases. Let's take Venezuela. Now stands the next casualty of spectacle governance. The deployment of the U.S. Gerald R. Ford, America's most advanced aircraft carrier, to the Venezuelan waters under the justification of a drug intervention mission, rather than which immediately raised alarms. Carrier strike groups are not used for chasing drug boats. They are instruments of a war in deterrence. Venezuela responded by mobilizing nearly 200,000 troops. Then came the most chilling realization. The Washington Post reported a classified Justice Department memo indicating the U.S. personnel involved in the potential strike would not be held legally liable. Why would a president need legal installation for a military action unless he believes it might be violating the law? This is a question that I think all of us need to be careful to consider. This question that should shake us to the core and ask us what is truly happening here. Constitution is clear. Only Congress can declare war. Yet Trump appears willing to engineer a confrontation of his own authority, bypass democratic checks for the sake of dramatic imagery. Jets on carrier decks, presidential speeches about restoring order, and show of force designed to impress his base. But behind those images lies real danger. Venezuela's humanitarian crisis is severe family suffering, infrastructure's collapsing, citizens fleeing. They need international aid and diplomatic coordination. They do not need the staging by a president of a new political theater that he can brag about. Across every foreign crisis, the same pattern emerges. Spectacle, declaration by him, abandoned by him, and then chaos. Trump's governing style is not just ineffective, it is globally destabilizing. It erodes alliances. It affects adversaries to the point that they can advance against the things that we as Americans could offer other countries. It undermines the institutions and it places innocent lives at risk. It's hollow out American credibility. It weakens the moral authority the United States once had as a defender of democracy. And worst of all, it binds the American public. And it, with all these actions, and it also blinds the American public with his spectacle. So stop seeing it for what it is and look deeper to what he's doing, which is very superficial and it's not leadership. Leadership is not performance. It is responsibility, and Trump consistently refuses that responsibility. His presidency reveals a man who sees international crises as an opportunity for self-promotion, not human tragedies requiring compassion and discipline. The contrast with Harris's truth-telling in 107 days becomes clear. Her account illustrates the work of democracy, the discipline of leadership, the courage to confront the truth. Trump's actions illustrate what happens when the leader is replaced and leadership is replaced by someone that's based only on his ego. And America pays the price. I think we must realize what is at stake. The global landscape is shifting. The United States can no longer afford a president who governs through a spectacle and abandons the responsibilities of statesmanship. Trump's actions in the Ukraine, Gaza, Iran, and Venezuela demonstrate the dangers of superficial engagement with crises that require strategic depth. America needs leaders who understand the world, not as a stage, but as a network of human beings that have lives and history. And there is a fragile system in need of careful stewardship, which he has no understanding of. This is why 107 days matters. Harris reminds us of that truth still exists, that leadership still requires integrity, and that democracy still depends on responsibility. Trump reminds us of the cost of abandoning these principles. The stakes are global, the consequences are profound, and the choice belongs to us. I think one of the most disturbing things I see is the erosion of global trust in our country. Trust is a currency that's more valuable than any military might. It allows nations to cooperate, to form alliances, and to work together through conflict. When trust erodes, even the most basic democratic engagements become fraught with uncertainty. Trump's presidency has profoundly damaged global trust in American leadership. Allies no longer know whether agreements will be honored. They do not know whether a diplomatic breakthrough will be reversed with the next headline. They do not know whether the United States will remain committed to shared goals or abandon them for the next dramatic moment. The erosion of trust has measurable consequences. European allies have taken steps to pursue independent defense plans. Asian allies have increased military spending and shifted strategic calculations. Nations in the Middle East have sought new patrons and partners. Latin American partners have opened their doors to China in a way they never would if Trump had not arrived on the scene. All this is happening because Trump has made the United States unpredictable, unreliable, and unstable in the eyes of the world. Lost in Trump's theatrics are the human beings whose lives are directly affected by his actions. Again, the families in Venezuela facing hunger, medical shortages, and repression. The families in Gaza who struggle to rebuild, and all the killing that happened in Gaza. The families in Ukraine living under the shadow of missiles and drones. Families in Iran affected by escalation and retaliation. These lives are not props. They are not backdrops for our present speeches. They are not a way to politically position the president. They are a people who need stability, compassion, and careful leadership. He seems incapable of showing any of those characteristics. When Trump treats global crisis as a stage for personal drama, he betrays not only American principles, but the human beings who depend upon American leadership being thoughtful, serious, and grounded in empathy. Our foreign aid is a perfect example. There are hundreds of thousands of people that will die because he has stopped our foreign aid. There is lack of empathy in every action he takes. The human cost of his decisions is profound and is rarely acknowledged in his rhetoric. I think we are living through a moment that will be studied by historians for generations. Political systems around the world rise or fall based on choices like those being made today. Democracies survive only when Americans demand accountability and leaders respect the institutions designed to check their power. Trump's second term reveals a crisis that goes far beyond policy differences. It is a crisis of character, integrity, and constitutional loyalty. When a president governs by spectacle, he endangers not only the reputation of the United States, but he endangers all of us. And that is why the truth matters so deeply in this moment. That is why I think Harris's book, 107 Days, is more than a campaign memoir. It is an act of grounding, an author that helps us anchor ourselves against the storm of misinformation and ego-driven leadership. Her truth-telling offers a blueprint for how democracy can function when leaders embrace responsibility rather than performance. As we face the uncertainty of Trump's increasing military positioning, failure in peace initiatives, and constitutional overreach, Harris's insistence on truth, accountability, and strategic reflection become even more valuable. The United States must rediscover what responsible leadership looks like. Leadership who respect the weight of their office do not rush into conflict for dramatic effect. They do not dismiss alliances that have preserved peace for generations. They do not treat the world as a backdrop for personal ambition. They do not abandon truth for applause. Responsible leaders require the following: patience, discipline, strategic foresight, respect for expertise, understanding of history, compassion for human life, and commitment to constitutional principles. These qualities are not optional. They are essential for any president who hopes to maintain global stability and uphold America's moral role in our world. Trump has abandoned these values. His presidency is defined not by wisdom, but by impulse, not by depth, but by theatrics, not by truth, but spectacle. And the world is suffering because of it. I think we're standing on a period in our lives. We can no longer pretend that Trump's actions are harmless or that his leadership is simply unconventional. His decisions, whether in the Ukraine, Gaza, Iran, or Venezuela, carry consequences that reverberate across countries and continents. We must decide whether the presidency is a stage for personal glorification or an institution built to safeguard democracy. We must decide whether foreign policy is a photo option are a disciplined craft requiring humility and knowledge. We must decide whether the Constitution is guiding framework or a nuisance to be ignored. This is not a matter of political preferences. It is a matter of national security and global stability. Kamala Harris reminds us that leadership is not the absence of mistakes, but the willingness to acknowledge them and learn from them. Leadership is not the absence of pressure, but willingness to remain truthful under it. Leadership is not the absence of crisis, but discipline to negotiate and navigate it with clarity and integrity. Her book serves as a counterweight to everything Trump embodies. It is a reminder that diplomacy requires work, thoughtful work, honest work, relentless work. It requires leaders who do not seek the spotlight, but seek the truth. In an era defined by spectacle, Harris offers us substance. In a moment defined by distortion, she offers clarity. In a moment when the president is being twisted into theater, she reminds us of its intended purpose, service, restraint, and responsibility. I want to conclude by saying we have a choice. The United States cannot afford to continue the path of spectacle. The world is too fragile, the stakes are too high, and the consequences too severe. We must choose leaders who understand the seriousness of their role and the lives affected by their decisions. Trump's actions from Ukraine to Iran to Gaza to Venezuela, and even the actions he's taken in our country, reveal a pattern that endangers global stability and undermines democratic principle. These are not minor flaws. They are profound failures of his judgment and his character. They are profound failures of Trump's judgment and his character. Harris's 107 days offers a different vision rooted in truth, transparency, and commitment to democratic ideas. We have one path that leads us toward more instability, more conflict, and more erosion of trust if we stay with what Trump is doing. The other leads us to restoration, truth, and responsible governance. The stakes are global, the consequences are profound, and the choice belongs to you and me and everyone in this country. Thank you for listening to me tonight. I hope if you had a hard time hearing me or going along with my podcast, that you'll at least read my blog, which has my script. You will also have references, I always do, to provide you that if you want to look further into these issues, you'll have some things that can expand your knowledge base and experience. This is Dr. Jackalyn with Hot Topic, Bold Talk.